Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and check out our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And finally, check out our new Altar Sleeves. Get your custom sleeve image of the Magic Mics crew at altarsleeves.com/magicmics. I am Evan Irwin, and this is getting us started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
How's it going, everybody?
Ruben on an Altar Sleeve.
That's right. How's it going? I'm excited to talk about, this is neither multicolored nor a human, this card that this is on, but I'm excited to talk about multicolored humans.
We also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent in letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 zero-power creatures. Ruben?
Well, I have been on a pronunciation website listening to how to correctly pronounce Löwenherz so that I could tell them that they were the comment of the week.
Nice.
They write, the absolute audacity to not include Doran the Siege Tower, the tree that planted his roots firmly into an extended art champs promo, is a mockery to the game. I was under the impression Ruben would have been foaming at the mouth to talk about the old splintery man. And Löwenherz, you're not wrong.
I should have given Evan that name. That would have been...
No, you shouldn't have. What kind of masochist am I working with here?
He's going to have to say it right now.
Doran the Siege Tower is... No, I'm not. Is a green, black, and white for 0/5 rare legendary tree folk shaman. Each creature assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. This was a classic story told by Aaron Forsyth many, many years ago, where they went to lunch and they're like, we have no idea how to make the tree folk different or unique. And I believe it was Aaron. It might have been someone else, but I think it was Aaron. Like, hey, what if we had them assign damage equal to toughness? We've never done that before. And it was like, whoa, that's really cool. And then they didn't do it again for many years. But like, it was really cool at the time. And then later they were like, oh, we could make this like, not exactly
we can bring it back as a thing that we can use often.
Also, one of our amazing listeners recently gave us a round of promos, and the promo that I got was Doran. And so Doran's one of those cards that I do have an architect up for. I'm kind of tinkering away at it, and when the time is right, I'll pull the trigger and build that baby.
Yeah. And at the end of when Extended was popular, not the very end, but close to the end, that Doran rock deck was like the most popular deck for a minute in the old Extended format.
It was a thing. Wizards likes to give a lot of toughness pretty much freely, as it were, and so it makes this ability randomly awesome.
Yeah, they've really been into bugs lately. I mean, Dreadhorde Arcanist is a 1/3 for some reason. Like, why?
Yeah, exactly.
Because
they like giving things an extra toughness or two. Just
we're all
kicks.
about body positivity here,
right?
So, congratulations to Löwenherz.
Close enough. Close enough.
We'll take it.
Löwenherz. Löwenherz. There you go.
Please contact Aaron on social media.
You got to pronounce the R in the back of your tongue. Helps.
You gotta pull it. You gotta pull. Contact Aaron on social media before she blocks you on all of them.
I don't know how I would block a name with an umlaut in it. Like
that's right.
Nothing wrong with that. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway, and stay tuned for our top 10 list this week. Maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. Yeah.
At least there wasn't a schwa in their name, and
What's
that would have been. It's the upside down E.
Oh, okay.
Yep, it definitely is. All right, well, this week we get to talk about our top 10 multicolor humans. We've been through every iteration, all through the color wheel. Now it's for more than one color of the color wheel. It's going to be super duper fun.
Yep, only humans that are at least one color, at least two colors qualify for this list.
Right. So, Ruben, why don't you kick us off here with your number 10?
Well, I would, except for that my number 10 is higher. One of my hires on somebody else's list.
Aaron, what's your number 10?
So I said we're all about body positivity here, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to do that with my number 10, who is everything I look for in a man. He's strong. He appears to have a good job. He's on a serviceable magic card, and I'm a huge fan. My number 10 is Bruce Tarl, Boorish Herder. So Bruce Tarl is two colorless, a red and a white. He was originally printed in Commander 2016, legendary creature, human ally, and he's an ally. Look at that. 3 power, 3 toughness. Whenever Bruce Tarl enters the battlefield or attacks, target creature you control gains double strike and lifelink until the end of turn, and he has partners. So he's looking for a partner, and you see a possible partner in the background. We don't judge, but he's big, he's beautiful, he's got a nice little round barrel tummy here, he's got pecs for days, a little bit of chest hair, he's bald, nice bushy brows, nice bushy stash, the biceps. I'm a fan.
The barrel chests aren't really what we see a lot of on Magic cards.
That's true.
Exactly.
This body archetype is not something that we typically get, and also the word boorish. He's bad-mannered. That's the adjective that we're... No, it's fine. He also looks like he should be lifting a weight that is labeled 1 ton in large white text.
I'm just saying, if I'm ever looking for another partner, if I'm looking for a partner, I know who to call.
That's right.
Wow, goodness. Well, for my number 10, there were lots of right here, here and there, but I wanted to include this one because it's just one of my favorite creatures. I love value. I particularly love a Mole Drifter. As I recall, when I sold off my Magic Online collection for the 37th time or whatever it was, at this point had been between when I started playing Lorwyn and when I stopped playing Lorwyn. And I know I had well into 3 digits of Mole Drifters, but the closest thing with the 2 colors, 420, Cloud Blazer it. All right, y'all?
Yeah.
Cloud Blazer is a white, a blue, and 3 generic mana for a 2/2 uncommon human scout, originally from Kaladesh. Has flying. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life and draw 2 cards. You don't just get to draw 2 cards, you get 2 life on top of it. Yeah. And you have a 2/2 flyer. This
is all I ever want in a Magic card. It's like a Sphinx's Revelation on a 2/2. Yeah. This is like a baby Hydroid Krasis. It's a little, it's a Mole Drifter. It compares favorably to all of my favorite Magic cards. This is one of the very few multicolored cards I would first pick first pack that weren't rare. One of the multicolored uncommons I would first pick first pack in Kaladesh draft.
Yeah, this card is absolutely terrific. So always enjoyed a good Cloud Blazer. So move on here to a number 9. Ruben, you got a number 9?
I do have a number 9, and it is one of the most played humans in my recent history of playing Magic. Since it was printed in Ixalan, it won a Pro Tour in the hands of Seth Manfield in Pro Tour Albuquerque, Pro Tour Ixalan in Sultai Energy. It is just a really good value creature in the God Pharaoh's Gifts decks, in mid-range decks, in energy decks, whatever and what have you. Everybody loves a Hostage Taker. Card's insane. When Hostage Taker, now it's also one of the only cards to have ever been errated before release.
Yeah.
Every paper copy of Hostage Taker has different text, technically, than the errated version. Hostage Taker is 2 colorless, blue-black for a 2/3 human pirate. When it enters the battlefield, exile another target creature or artifact until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to exile another target rather than
the printed version could essentially draw the game upon entering the battlefield itself.
If it were the only permanent, or the only creature or whatever.
Yeah, this card defines standard. Especially, you would pair this with just this was really good. It was good in control strategies, it was good in mid-range strategies. Fantastic art here. You have this powerful black woman pirate. Great card.
Oh, yeah, the card was absolutely terrific from the moment it showed up. It's still worth a pretty penny considering it's been out of print for many years. This is a commander staple, I guess, at this point. But, being able to take the creature and be able to play it, it was scary and limited. It was great and constructed.
Or artifact, yeah.
Right.
Or,
I would like to see the Wayne Reynolds Magic Online promo art make it onto a paper Magic card in some way, shape, or form. Because that Hostage Taker is holding a dinosaur hostage.
Wow.
Which is amazing.
I've never seen this before. This is vicious.
Yeah.
Check out the Magic Online promo. It's pretty dope. Aaron,
good.
what's your number 9?
So speaking of blue-black cards, this is a card that actually reminds me of Ruben and I. And I've joked about this before, that if we ever, do another live show, if we ever do another event together and we happen to be at the same event, we should do this cosplay, because I think that this card is very symbolic of us and our relationship. These are 2 beloved characters that had each been given their own cards separately, but this was the first time that they were combined into a card for Eldritch Moon. My number 9 is Gisa and Geralf. So Gisa and Geralf is 2 colorless, a blue and a black, for a legendary creature creature human wizard, 4 power and 4 toughness. When Gisa and Geralf enter the battlefield, you put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard, and then during each of your turns, you may cast a zombie creature card from your graveyard. And so this has really become the Dimir zombie commander. Some say that it has even replaced Grimgrin as being the zombie, tribal du jour because it's so good. But, when I think of the relationship between these two, and even if you look at the flavor text of, that biting, but still a lot of love there. And it's also just simple. So, Ruben has the messy hair. We just give him an eye patch and a white tunic, and I'll throw on an old black quinceañera dress, and we'll do this. It'll be great.
Not just an eye patch. It looks like it's a jeweler's loop, essentially.
You can do that.
Oh, cool. Like a big thick leather strap around the head and stuff.
I mean, I could wear the Mandarin collar with the leather apron.
The butcher leather apron.
Yes.
Yeah, Geralf is more of the scientific, mad scientist side of zombies.
And if we're feeling really ballsy, Evan could be Grimgrin.
Ooh, like that. How do you feel about that? I could
be like Shaun of the Dead. I'm the zombie on the chain.
Yep.
I'll be fine.
I love it.
That won't be weird or anything. All right, so for my number 9 here, it's my number 9 because I love the gameplay in this card. I thought it was a brilliant idea to do it. There are fewer cards that the spikier players enjoy more than those that let your opponent make a mistake. And, good old Sun Tzu, never interrupt your opponent, your enemy, when they're making a mistake. And so when you play Atris, Oracle of Half-Truths, you give them a nice, good opportunity to do something dumb. And that's just you just can't get better Magic cards than that. Atris, Oracle of Half-Truths really showed up as a rare in Theros Beyond Death. It is a black, blue, and 2 generic mana for a 3/2 legendary human advisor with Menace. And when it enters the battlefield, target opponent looks at the top 3 cards of your library and separates them into a face-down pile and a face-up pile. You put one pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. And there's just some beautiful gameplay around all right, show me what you got. Give them the opportunity to do something bad. Sure. And I can't get enough of it. I love it.
This was my Brawl commander with Gyruda as the companion for a while. So evens Atris. Oof. And just going turn 2 Signet, turn 3 Atris, pick whichever pile has 2 cards in it. Yeah. Honestly, that's all you need to do. It's even the second and third best cards on top of your deck are going to be good enough usually. And I love Atris so much. Yeah. It's such a cool card.
Yeah. A bit of a nightmare of our webcam commander, though. So just maybe not the best.
Well, that's fair. Trying to hold them
that's
up. That's
true.
It's like, this card and these other 2. And sure, okay.
I can see that.
Okay, let's move on here to number 8. Mine is higher on somebody else's list. Ruben, you got one?
Nope. Higher on somebody else's list.
Aaron, you want to save us here?
Yeah, I think this card is enough for everybody. So this card was a really important step in representation towards the game. We had a really nice string of characters there that really showed that Wizards cared about diversifying things a little bit. We had Ashiok that was very much a they character. Ashiok just went by Ashiok. They didn't really have pronouns or anything. We had the introduction of Alesha, which was the first trans canon character. And then we had these 2, which to my knowledge was the first gay couple that had been ever conceived and put on a card like this. My number 8 is Kaneos and Tiro of Meletis. Yeah. So Kaneos and Tiro are 1 red, 1 green, 1 white, and 1 blue. Legendary creature human soldier with 2 power and 8 toughness. How about that booty? At the beginning of your end step, draw a card. Each player may put a land card from his or her hand onto the battlefield, and then each opponent who didn't draws a card. So we first saw them previewed in Guardians of Meletis, which I believe was like a 0/10.
0/6.
Thank you. From the original Theros. That was just like an artifact creature wall. It didn't really see a lot of play there, but it was just flavor text, if I remember correctly. And the flavor text sort of previewed these 2 and their relationship. And you can actually see the art for Guardians of Meletis in the background here. But this card, if you when you think of group hug and commander, you tend to think of this card because it really just kind of gets you with that style of play. But this was really the first card where it was unmistakable that these 2 are a couple. You have these subtle sort of hand on the back of his neck there. The flavor text of look what we fought for, look what we built together. Just a really beautiful card that to this day just continues to mean so much to people.
There's a lot of great flavor about Kainos and Tiro of Meletis in the Mythic Odysseys of Theros. All right,
come on,
and I'm trying to find the part that I really like the most, but it's all over the book. Like the myth is in 3 or 4 different locations because it's such an important and indelible part to the entire world. I mean, this is the Athens equivalent. Meletis is the center of Theros from a civilization standpoint. And so these two characters are completely indelible and could be as important, if not more important, than individual gods to the day-to-day lives of people that live on Theros.
And that's what I really enjoy about it, sort of from that aspect, which is Wizards, like, this is the cornerstone of the world. You can't take this out. You can't just be like, well, we're going to remove the gay part or whatever, and then suddenly, we'll just move by. No, this is like integral into how the world works. Like, you just have to get over it and make sure that these people are a part of the story. And I think that's fantastic. You can't just, you can't make them replaceable. And
right.
I really enjoy that. Beyond the insane lore, I can only imagine in the Theros book for the 2/8 over here.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they both have quite the toughness.
All right, fair enough. So let's move on here to number 7. Aaron, what's number 7?
So my number 7 was a huge hit right out of the gate. I remember where I was when this card was previewed because it was everything I wanted to be doing in life. It was a slam dunk in the Delirium decks, and it even sees quite a bit of play in Commander, and even older formats. I've seen it in Modern a time or two in the Gen decks, and particularly Abzan decks for some reason. I love this card. My number 7 is Grimflayer. Grimflayer is a black and a green. It's a human warrior from Eldritch Moon, 2 power, 2 toughness with trample. Whenever Grimflayer deals combat damage to a player, you look at the top 3 cards of your library, put any number of them into your graveyard, and the rest back on top in any order. This is for 2 mana. You could have stopped at 2/2 with trample, but there's more. And it also has Delirium, which means that Grimflayer gets +2/+2 as long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard. And so between this and Vessel of Nascency, it was pretty hard to not have Delirium. And so, by the time you would get to Ishkana or even Emrakul before it was banned, Delirium was frighteningly easy to get. It was not hard at all. You were also playing Liliana the Last Hope, so you really didn't care what you put in the graveyard because you had a good chance of getting it back anyways. And so this was exactly what you wanted to be doing. It was good in the early game because it was uncontested a lot of the time. You didn't mind drawing it later because you probably have Delirium already, and then it's just a 4/4 with trample, which is fine. And so this was obviously great in the Jund Abzan decks in Modern because it feeds your Tarmogoyf. And also if you're playing Traverse the Ulvidwald, which you were running with this, it's very likely you're going to have Delirium, and that's just a 1 mana get anything you want at that point. And so just a really powerful card that still goes for about $3 or $4 depending on where you get it from.
This was my number 8 because I love a Grimflayer. This also feels like one of those designs that we're not going to get as much anymore when Wizards continues to talk about how they're sort of commander focused. They're not constructed focused. This to me is very constructed type of card.
Sure.
This is a card that's going to go in the Delirium deck. You're going to need 4 of it, so you're going to need 4 of these mythics. Whenever there's a mythic 2-drop, I'm always afraid, basically, because I'm like, what are they going to do now?
If you have a mythic 1 or a mythic 2, sit up and take notice.
Yes, because they're usually ridiculous. And it turns out this one was ridiculous. So,
and the reason why, Grimflayer really is the reason to play Abzan, whereas like Bloodbraid Elf is the reason to play Jund, because Abzan you can use like the Grimflayer and like Lingering Souls kind of interaction. There's a bunch of more specific things that you want to be doing with the Abzan thing. They try to play a longer game, basically. What happens when you replace Lightning Bolt with Path to Exile is you want the game to go longer. And so, Grimflayer is just an insane engine and clock and all for 2 mana. Card's amazing.
Yeah, this was they're selling the set constructed wise on the back of a ridiculous 2-drop.
Yeah.
All right. Ruben, what's number 7?
My number 7 is, has always been, as far as I can tell, one of the most popular build around me commanders that's ever been built. I'm not sure it's competitive as a commander in terms of like, you play the Gitrog monster or you play Arkham Dagson and you want to kill people on turn 2 or whatever. But people love, and I always have loved, Captain Sisay.
Yeah.
People love Captain Sisay so much that it's been reprinted in From the Vault Legends, the Historic Anthology, and was even part of a secret lair drop. Captain Sisay is 2 colorless, green-white for a 2/2 legendary creature, human soldier, originally printed as just a legend. It has tap, search your library for a legendary card, reveal that card and put it in your hand, then shuffle your library.
There was a moment where Wizards said, hey, all of the Planeswalkers are now legendary. They're not just Planeswalkers. And that's when the card exploded. At the time, I recall it was like maybe $8 to $10 or something. Went to like $40, $50 overnight. This was before they did any really reprints. Maybe it was around From the Vault Legend times, maybe not, but certainly Secret Lair. It was after that for the Secret Lair. And so this is a fantastic card. It's cool that it's in Historic and Arena, which is nice. Again, you go whatever legend you want. But for what it does, it's very unique. It was very close to my list.
Also, turn 4, play Captain Sisay. Turn 5, tap it, search for Urza's Ruinous Blast. That's a nice turn.
Yeah, you better Sisay that walk. I always dread Sisay in Commander just because this tutor ability to, just get whatever answer you're looking for and just think of all the powerful, like, I'm just going to go get an Elish Norn. I'm just going to go get a whatever. It's just like, I'm always just on the edge of my seat. I'm always terrified of what these decks are capable of. And you've got to respect them. Absolutely.
There's always such a weird legend for every corner case scenario. You're like, I went and got a Hirobi Dust Drinker.
Oh, yeah.
Because you tapped all your lands. Or I went and got, Elish Norn is another great example. It's just like, what is happening?
And you brought up a good point about legendary card. Back in the day, it used to be that, tribes and even legendary were not just restricted to creatures. You could be a goblin enchantment. You could be a rogue sorcery or whatever. And so, when they say legend or legendary, opens up a lot of doors.
Like, I expect legendary spells to come back whenever we go back to Dominaria, because that was a fantastic mechanic.
Now give us back tribal. Give us rogue enchantments.
I'm so sad that they didn't bring back tribal sorceries for the giants.
What's the harm in that?
I think one day, like most things in Magic, they'll be like, you know what? Maybe we were a little too quick on tribal, and we should give it another go and not be weird about it. And we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. So for my number 7 here, this is one of my favorite creatures. This is one of the coolest creatures sort of at the time, even for just an uncommon, in that it did things that were so unique and so powerful that it got to name its own archetype, basically. Cartel Aristocrat made up the Aristocrats.
Yeah. This was my number 10.
Nice. This was a black and white mana for a 2/2 uncommon human advisor that you sacrifice another creature : and remember, anytime in Magic the Gathering you see sacrifice a creature : you stand up, you pay attention, and this one says you sack a creature : it gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. That gets you through walls of blockers. That gets you the last couple points. You're pinging them and draining them from your Blood Artist as much as you can. And Cartel Aristocrat was, a cornerstone.
Yep.
They don't really give us free sack outlets anymore. Normally you have to tap something or you have to pay a mana cost. We just don't get it this good anymore. And, for an ability that does something exactly what you want with an aggressive deck like that, where, they can get in and attack you if they need to. And this is a lot of times how they'll do that.
Yeah, Cartel Aristocrat, they don't give us a free sack outlet like this or Viscera Seer or Goblin Bombardment. They don't put it on a 2-mana card anymore. It'll either be a colorless and sacrifice, or it costs you 5 mana for the initial thing.
Yeah.
They don't, Woe Strider is a way outlier in terms of what they typically give us. And that's even on turn 3.
Right. Even that's 3 mana before you get to do any of that cool, fun stuff.
It couldn't protect itself like Cartel Aristocrat can. Yep. It's insane.
Yep.
At instant speed for 0 mana. Wow.
Yeah.
Those were the days.
Tell you what. Let's move on here to number 6. Mine is higher on somebody else's list.
Me too.
Ruben.
My first of 2 hires.
Ooh. Ruben, don't worry, I got us. Don't you worry. What? I have 3 words for you. Banned in Commander. All right? That's how powerful Prophet of Kruphix is.
Nice.
Prophet of Kruphix is 3 colorless green-blue for a 2/3 human wizard. Untap all creatures and lands you control during each other player's untap step.
What?
You may cast creature spells as though they had flash. Oh my goodness, this card was bananas in 2-player formats. In draft, you would just be like, Prophet, go, untap, play my Nessian ass mid-combat. Not to mention when you have like an engine that you can do, right? You have like a Garruk's Uprising in play, and you play Prophet, untap, play a 4-power creature, draw a card. Next player goes, you also play another 4-power creature, play another 4-power creature. You can do all of these Glimpse of Nature shenanigans and refill your hand, and by the time it's your turn again, you got an entire army on the board.
If I remember correctly, it was banned very quickly after release. And this was a time when Simic this is before they even started pushing Simic to the extent they have now, where you have, Hydrate Krasis and Oko and Uro and all that. This was before then. And Simic was, a dominant force in Commander. It's still good, but from what I understand, it's not nearly the color combination to sure. But yeah, just the Seedborn Muse effect alone is fine. But then you add that little bit on there that's like, oh, and by the way, creatures with Flash. Like, come on.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and if you look at the Magic 2015 Clash Pack version, which has amazing artwork, this to me was sort of primed to be an amazing Commander card that Wizards could reprint, time and time again. But like, for someone who doesn't even play Commander, for me to like have literally audibly heard people go, "Oh my God, again," or "Oh my God, Prophet, seriously," like as I was walking through Cool Stuff and Cool Stuff game stores and stuff. Yeah, this card was a serious problem.
Which is a shame, because in both cases the art is beautiful of just the fluid motion there. I mean, you have the regular Theros version, which appears to be it almost looks like she's holding silk and she's sort of just moving it back and forth, which is beautiful. But then you have that Clash Pack, which is where it appears like she's almost like ripping the fabric of time, where you see like stars. Like, it's a shame this can't see more play, because the art is so worth it.
Yeah.
Sometimes
and if you love that art, Kaideli, Chosen of Krufix, may be your commander, which is one of the legendary prophets of Krufix.
Nice. All right. Well, that carried our number 6. Let's go to number 5. Aaron, what you got?
If you would have told me that my number 5 was going to be at the helm of a legacy archetype, I would have never believed you. And it happens sometimes with commander cards. But it's my understanding that they've stopped trying to push that. And so I was surprised that people thought this card was going to be a thing. And I'm also surprised at the cards that have made this a thing. My number 5 is Yuriko the Tiger Shadow. So Yuriko is one colorless, a blue and a black. She was printed in Commander 2018. Legendary creature, human ninja, 1 power and 3 toughness with Commander Ninjutsu for blue and a black. So you can pay a blue and a black and return an unblocked attacker you control to your hand. And then you put this card onto the battlefield from your hand or the command zone, tapped and attacking.
That's cool.
It also says whenever a ninja you control deals combat damage to a player, you reveal the top card of your library and you put that card into your hand. Each opponent loses life equal to that card's converted mana cost. So this card is doing a lot. But what it's doing right now is in a fringe deck in Legacy called Ninjas. And so you're playing a lot of strange cards like Ornithopter. You're playing a lot of the cheap Changeling cards, specifically the Black Changeling, I believe, that's unblockable. And so you're playing a lot of these really unassuming creatures that are able to attack very quickly, so that you get Yuriko in right away and you just start bearing your opponent in card advantage. And so you have eventually your Dazes, your Brainstorms, your Force of Will, and they just can't keep up with you. And so this deck has been like tier 1.5, tier 2 for a while. I don't think it's ever been tier 1, but it's always a treat to see this card do its thing. It runs like Retrofitter Assembly as well.
Retrofitter Foundry. I'm looking at this list. It's crazy.
It's hilarious. And it can do surprisingly well sometimes, and Yuriko's a big part of the reason why.
Wow. Who knew?
Who knew Retrofitter Foundry was a card that was going to be a thing?
Exactly.
Of all the cards, well, I mean, I like a ninja.
Yeah.
That always
this
goes
deck
over
has
great.
Yuriko and Indigenous Infiltrator, who are the inheritors of the Ninja of the Deep Hours mantle. So yeah, that's great. I love that ninjas are seeing play in command in competitive formats and not just the commander ninjutsu.
Ingenious Infiltrator basically is a 2/3 instead of a 2/2. And ninjutsu's for a black and a blue instead of a blue and a generic. So Ninja of the Deep Hours is a 2/2. This is a 2/3. That's your
and
difference.
It says whenever a ninja you controls deals damage, not just itself, draw a card. So two of them
changelings,
I see.
And 2 of them draw you 4 cards.
Whoa, that's pretty.
No one's gonna be able to keep up with you.
All right. Well, Ruben, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is the last higher. It's on somebody else's list.
Well, okay then. Well, I can definitely carry my number 5. It's funny what happens when you film complete set reviews, and it's also funny when you dismiss cards that you originally are just like, this. Why are we here? If someone had stopped Brad and myself before we had done the Gate Crash review and said, you probably should give Burning Tree Emissary a little bit of a look-see. You should probably think about how powerful a 2/2 for 2 that gives you 2 mana.
It's essentially free. Yeah,
that's basically free. That if you have a handful, you play. And so that was kind of silly when you go back and we more or less dismiss what ended up being one of the format all-stars and is still fantastic and historic to this day and still sees play. And You don't want anything more powerful than this, but it's still really great as a 2-mana 2/2. Burning Tree Emissary is 2 Gruul mana. That's 2 red or green mana in any combination. It's a 2/2 uncommon human shaman, and when it enters the battlefield, you add a red and a green to your mana pool. So, turns out that's amazing, and I should have known better, and there we were.
This card was briefly suspended in Historic for how powerful it was. I mean, it's essentially a Frogmite when it was first printed, which is a free 2/2. There are turns where you can go turn 2, 4 Burning Tree Emissaries, and just slam them on the board, and then the game just ends at that point. We're done here. We don't need to do anymore.
Yeah.
There's a Bushwhacker that has Surge that can give them all haste. There are a number of decks that have played Burning Tree.
Yeah, people used to describe Siege Rhino as being like Pringles because you would never eat just one. Burning Tree Emissary was always the same. It was very rare that they never had something to do with that mana. This was a deck with Flinthoof Boar. You had this, you had Gore Clan Rampager, you had Frontline Medic, you had Boros Charm. I mean, this was a blistering fast Naya deck that could just run you over in a matter of 3 or 4 turns.
And lest we forget that Burning Tree Emissary did also help get Nissa, Oath of Nissa, and Leyline of Anticipation, or Leyline of Green, whichever one, banned in Pioneer.
House of Abundance.
Abundance, there we go. Because you would go turn 1 mana elf, turn 2, play a Nykthos, Burning Tree Emissary, activate the Nykthos, play a bunch of crap.
Oh my god, that sounds insane. Yeah, so any card that happens to give you free mana for just playing it, you should probably pay lots of attention and not downplay it. Call it not great.
Yeah.
Let's move on here to our number 4. Ruben, what's number 4?
My number 4 is banned in 2 formats. It's banned in Brawl and Historic. Came very close to getting banned in Standard. It was the centerpiece of Standard for a pretty long time, considering the fact that no one really gave Winota Joiner of Forces a ton of attention right out of the gate. Winota Joiner of Forces is 2 colorless red-white for a 4/4 human warrior. Whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put a human creature card from among them onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains indestructible until the end of the turn. Put the rest of the cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this was most popularly used to try to find Agent of There was a whole period of Standard where the only thing you wanted to do was play like tiny goblins or like raise the alarms and then get Agent of Treachery out of your deck. Michael Jacob almost won a Players' Tour final with a deck that didn't have Agent of Treachery and just used Winota alongside, Lazotep Reaver to put value onto the board, to get Judiths and Basri's Lieutenants and things like that.
Yeah, in older formats, people started pairing this with Goblin Rabblemaster, and Legion Warboss and things like that. And then you would go looking for Angrass Marauders, which is essentially like a Furnace of Wrath, and so you would double all damage, and then it would just get obnoxious. And
the Angrass Marauders was what got it, nixed in Historic because it was a combo.
Because you double power, and then you double power, and then you double
and
power.
And even the math
take
on this, like I remember Frank Karsten crunched the numbers, and like it just wasn't hard to get it going. I think people thought it was going to have a lot of work involved, and oh no.
Now, the problem is a couple fold. One is anytime a Magic card says look at more than 4 cards, I'm always like, what's going on here? And secondly, Winota can replace herself with herself and have an indestructible version of herself attacking. That's ridiculous.
That's the problem.
I mean, seriously.
But in Commander, it's fine. It's serviceable.
Commander,
it's not breaking anything.
It's a wonderful Commander.
Because you don't get to have 35 Angrath Marauders.
I mean, I think this was we had mentioned the shift towards Commander. I think this was the early stages of we're designing for Commander. We haven't quite figured out the knobs yet. Oops, it's too good for standard formats.
Yeah,
this seems like a cool Commander. I might build a Winota Commander deck. Would that be
even
would
just
that be
having
okay?
her in a deck is fine.
Yeah.
Right. This is, again, they got started, down back in Eldraine, and then as we kind of got into Ikoria, they're like, okay, here, but this busts of constructed formats in half. Lots of fun 100 card
And it's
formats.
also anachronistic to me. It did come out in Ikoria, which is like the land of behemoths. But we're trying to get big humans and little non-humans, which always confused me.
Well, the humans were a faction. I mean, I think it's feasible. I mean,
it's okay.
It was
I just would rather have big dinosaurs come out instead of 7 mana.
We would all
humans.
love a big dinosaur. We take what we
exactly.
Can get.
I'm just saying, the funny thing to me was I was like, oh my god, I can actually have herself bring herself into play
to
make herself indestructible. Oh my god. All right. Ruben, what's number 4?
My number 4 was Winota.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
I just
Aaron,
talked
what's your
about.
number 4?
My number 4 is the last higher on my list.
Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. That means I get to have my number 4. A card we have spoken of before. A card that was banned. A card that I couldn't believe they banned it. But because in limited, Reflector Mage was just not pulling the weight as a 2/2, so they had to jack it up to a 2/3.
This was my number 5.
Oh, nice! It was so stupidly overpowered for its day, for its time, that they banned the thing. It's so silly. Reflector Mage, my God, is a blue, white, and generic mana for a 2/3 uncommon human wizard from Oath of the Gatewatch. Oath of the Gatewatch, one of my most hated sets of all time. Right. When Reflector Mage enters the battlefield, return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. That creature's owner can't cast spells with the same name as that creature until your next turn. And man, this ability, God, if you've never had to experience it, God bless you, because I'm telling you, you would almost always have a second copy of that stupid creature, whatever it was they bounced, in your hand to make you extra frustrated at how stupid this ability is.
So this was a part of the blue-white flash deck, which was quite popular during Eldritch Moon, Shadows over Innistrad Standard. This compared with Black-Green Delirium, those were the best 2 decks in the format. And it was just a tempo game. You know, you had Looter Scooter, you had this, you had Spell Queller, and you would just play this really annoying sort of tempo game. And this card just won games and has continued to see life in human decks going all the way up to Vintage. I mean, in Modern, you pair it with either Vial, and then whoop, it just changes the game. And I don't think it would be as big of a deal if it didn't have that second clause, because usually when they're playing this, they're getting ready to close up the game. And so just being able to seal the deal like that. And in a lot of ways, like I said, if you are playing either Vial, it's free. You know, the fact that it has a good butt on it. I mean, being a human just opens up so many doors of Thalia's Lieutenant and other things like that. And it's just so good.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
good.
you add a color and you get Bant Company, and this was a huge piece of the Bant Collected Company deck. You'd play end of turn, and you get this, and you get Thalia's Lieutenant, and you'd go to town. And subtract a color, and you get the mono white aggro deck that I played a lot of, except for that I played 4 Port Towns and a couple of other blue sources only for Reflector Mage.
And this will always be a weird moment in time. Like, we are going to be, I mean, we could be doing this show 5 years from now, but we are always going to look back at the banning and restricted announcements. And when you look at just the gravity of cards where it's like Wild Nicottle, Bitter Blossom, Golgari Grave Troll, Reflector Mage. Like, people are going to be wondering, like, what our lives were, where it's like, how did this happen?
There's a couple weird ones.
It was a weird time to be playing Magic. I'll be honest. Particularly to have played as long as I have, to been like, this is the line. You did it. You went too far. They made
creatures so good that the Mana War gets banned.
Yeah.
Wow. Incredible. All right. Well, let's see here. Go on to number 3. Ruben, what's number 3?
Speaking of weird banned and restricted announcements, I remember when this banned and restricted announcement came out, and we looked at it, and it was like, we know they're going to ban stuff. What are they going to ban? And we were like, this is a weird list of cards to ban. Like Smuggler's Copter, okay, sure. Attune with Ether, that's where we're at in our lives. We're going to ban Attune with Ether.
Lay of the Land, yeah, sure.
Rampaging Ferocidon. Okay. All right, fine. Ramunap Ruins. All right. We're in weird territory. Rogue Refiner.
It's my number 6.
It's like the most value creature that's ever. I mean, this is how good creatures have gotten. Yeah. Is that this wouldn't have been banned 10 years ago because creatures were worse then.
Yeah.
But now Rogue Refiner is too good. Rogue Refiner, colorless, green, blue for a 3/2 human rogue. When Rogue Refiner enters the battlefield, draw a card, and you get 2 energy counters. Uncommon originally from Ether Revolt.
You know, I appreciate what they tried to do with energy. I always did. I always recognized. And energy is not going to be the last alternate resource that Magic has. They'll try again and call it something else. And I hope they don't break it in half that time where they have to ban Lay of the Lands and, cards that, cantrip or whatever. But Rogue Refiner was another key to that deck. And that 2 energy being half of this and a third of that and a quarter of this, like all that stuff just adds up to to too much.
Yeah. So there were a couple of things wrong with energy. I think the big one is that you had no real way to interact with it. There wasn't like a Leeches type card. There wasn't even like a Pithing Needle type card or even like a Tormod's Crypt card or just, no one was asking for Rest in Peace. No one was asking for Shatterstorm. They weren't asking for you to, completely hose the strategy that you just created, but there were literally no answers to it. There was no way to stop somebody from or reduce the amount of energy that someone had unless they did it to themselves. And you could just get it by playing Magic. That was the thing that made the Marvel deck so powerful, was that just about everything you did generated energy, which you would then pour into this thing that was never meant to be used so quickly. It was never meant to be used repeatedly, and it was certainly never meant to get the powerful threats that it did. And so, you're right. The fact that energy was so easily converted between colors and spells, the fact that you didn't really have to work that hard to get it, the fact that you had a way to remove it, it just ended up being one of the biggest, problem mechanics I've seen in a while.
I understand how, it can be very parasitic where, only energy cards will care about energy cards and stuff like that. But to have, subtle hosers like, a 2/2 that gets +1/+1 and trample if your opponent has energy.
Sure.
Or a card that draws a card if your opponent has energy. Or something that said, if you're playing the energy deck, I'm going to punish you for it. Not just in state of, I take it away from you ways.
How bad would a Hex Parasite for energy be? How bad would an Ether Snap be? Like, these are cards that didn't break things when they were printed for regular counters. I don't see why it would make much of a difference. The fact that there was no way to interact with an opponent's energy pool, when in even the flavor of the game, you could, dilute power from a power source, was a little upsetting.
When there was no way to stop Aetherworks Marvel beyond counter spells, like there was no Pithing Needle, there was no way to drain their energy or stop it. There was no like white creature that said your opponents can't spend energy. Like, seriously, these hate bears are not hard to come up with. Like,
no Containment Priest.
Just say
for Marvel, just for Marvel, Aaron.
For Marvel or anything.
Just for Marvel.
Give me some hate for energy that you can be creative with it, and I understand.
But you don't see this problem when there's a graveyard set. Oh no, they'll put graveyard.
They'll put a million things. Yeah.
Very nice. Well, that was my number 6. Aaron, what's your number 3?
Okay, so now we're getting into cards that have seen play in older formats or multiple formats, and this is a card that went all the way to the top of Vintage. Vintage has become a really fair format lately. For all that you hear about turn 1, turn 2, and people love to scare you with these boogeyman's of Tinker and Bolas's Citadel and Workshops, it's surprisingly fair right now. And one of the cards that is helping to keep Vintage fair is my number 3, which I think sees a little bit of modern play, maybe some legacy play, but I've definitely seen it in Vintage. It's good against any Storm decks, any decks that might be low on life, any decks that are looking to cast a lot of spells, can also pad your life total as well, and has a good butt on it. We talked about how Wizards is giving things bigger butts, and this certainly has one. My number 3 is Comble, Consul of Allocation. So Comble is 1 colorless, a white, and a black, is a legendary creature human advisor with 2 power and 3 toughness printed in Kaladesh. And it says whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So this really started this trend, these sort of asymmetrical hate spells, because Thalia affects both people. Or OG Thalia affected both people.
Right.
New Thalia doesn't, and then you have this, which also doesn't. And so they've really been printing these cards that really just punish one side and make you more likely to play them. And so this is a card that you absolutely want to be slamming against a Storm deck, against a Paradoxical Outcome deck, because eventually they're going to run out of life, and you're also padding your life, and so it makes you harder to kill as well. I have this in my Queen Marchesa deck. Obviously, it's an advisor. It's what you want to be doing. It's cheap. It's 3 mana or less, which the older formats love, and just makes a really great hate bear in case, they can pay for their Thalias or they have some other way to deal with it.
Yeah. This guy's great. I look at this guy and it's like, this is #goals. This is how I'm trying to be in my life. Just like has friends in high places and everybody owes him favors. Like that's just who I'm trying to be in my life.
It felt like there was a point in time at which somebody in R&D was the one like, well, we got to make it suck a little bit. Not a lot, but just a little bit. And then they got rid of that person, and now there's no bad parts on them anymore.
Sure.
It's like, nope, it's all upside for you. Yep, 100%. Yep, it's all great for you. Never always,
But again, this didn't dominate Standard. It's not it's seeing play, but it's not dominating any of the older formats.
Right.
This is just like I think a lot of people, I think they just like found a sweet spot.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of sweet spots, particularly on the mana curve, my number 3 here has been crushing it since back in 2012, essentially. This is a card that when they first came up with the mechanic, we only saw in the block that it showed up in until it popped over into Plane Chase. And then later, all the Legacy folks was like, you know what happens when I know exactly what the only spells that cost less than 3 mana are when I play Shardless Agent? Make sure I don't get them.
Right.
Because this card is dumb. Shardless Agent is a blue, a green, and a generic mana for a 2/2 uncommon human rogue. Well, it's an artifact creature human rogue. And it has Cascade. When you cast this spell, you exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast it without paying its mana cost, and you put the exiled cards on the bottom in a random order.
So Shardless Bug had kind of fallen off the map recently in Legacy just because it wasn't as good anymore. And then when Valky came out, Shardless Agent became popular again because you could cascade into Valky. And that was the best thing that you could be doing for, a good 2 or 3 weeks there until they fixed the cascade rulings there. But yeah, Shardless Agent had been a staple of Legacy for a long time. Obviously, you wanted to be careful how you build your deck. But yeah, cascading into Tarmogoyf is fine. Cascading to Lily is fine. There were just so many things you could cascade into that were just fine. And just iconic art. You think of that art, the fact that it's an artifact as well. People have to remind themselves of that. But yeah, when you're good enough to be the namesake of an eternal deck, that says something.
Yeah, shardless, meaning that they don't have any affiliation on the plane of Alara. But being an artifact creature, theoretically being from Esper, maybe being a double agent kind of deal. Cool flavor. I remember being in Los Angeles for the Star City Games Invitational that we had in LA. And I watched Jerry Thompson cast a Shardless Agent, or cast a Brainstorm, put an Ancestral Vision on top, and then cast a Shardless Agent and draw 3 cards for the first time. I saw this I was like, oh, I see. I see what we've done. I didn't understand that this was a Brainstorm card at first. And it is. And then he just cast Recall for free in Legacy. And I was like, right? Like, just Galaxy Brain, my head exploded.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why that card is sick. Yeah. Let's move on here to our number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
My number 2, for a while, was the card that, as far as I'm aware, had the most individual words on one Magic card, post errata, of any card. Partially because it has 2 faces, right? It's a double face card, and they just introduced double face cards. But of all the double face cards, none of them had more words than Huntmaster of the Fells.
Oh, yeah.
True.
And they all did things that were relevant. Huntmaster of the Fells is 2 colorless red-green for a 2/2 human werewolf. When it enters the battlefield or transforms into Huntmaster of the Fells, you make a 2/2 wolf creature token, and you gain 2 life. At the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, transform Huntmaster of the Fells into Ravager of the Fells, which is a 4/4 trample werewolf. When this creature transforms into Ravager of the Fells, it deals 2 damage to target opponent or planeswalker, and 2 damage to up to 1 target creature that player or that planeswalker's controller controls. And at the beginning of each upkeep, if the player casts 2 or more spells last turn, transform Ravager of the Fells. So it was a value creature, essentially. And you would play it, you'd gain 2 life, you'd make a 2/2, you could stem the tide of the damage that you were taking against your opponent's, Nyapod deck or blue-white Delver, and it was just good value. And then if your opponent was just sitting back and trying to relax and rest on their laurels, it would flip into this 4/4 monster that could ping their Insectile Aberration or take out their Huntmaster. And it lived on into Modern and became a popular value card in Jund Mirrors. And there was a brief moment where you could Violet into play and then not have cast any spells, and so it would flip immediately. There was a bunch of weird stuff that happened.
Oh, God, that's horrendous.
Yeah, this is still a $5 card. I played Standard Jund when it was, you had the Garrick Primal Hunter, I believe. You had Olivia Voldaren. You had this. You had your Rakdos Key Runes, and this was what you wanted to be doing. And, this was just an iconic Jund card. Jund is all about those haymakers that, by themselves can just run away with the game. And once you get to the point where you can start controlling the flips, you've basically lost the game. We talk a lot about that, the moments where you've lost and you don't realize you've lost yet, where, Sphinx's Revelation, if one gets off, you've just lost. And likewise, if they're controlling the Huntmaster, you're never coming back from that.
If there's a turn where Ravager flips and then you go bolt Colligan's command, flip it back, that game's completely gone. This also saw play in Human Reanimator because it's a human, obviously.
Yes.
This saw play in Legacy for a brief amount of time. Like you would go search for it with your Green Sun Zenith because Legacy at the time was like all these Delver decks that were all about 1-for-1s and little, ticky tack, dodge and weave, and then you'd play a Huntmaster, and your opponent's hand wouldn't be able to deal with it really. Like they could bolt the Huntmaster, but then you'd still kill him with a 2/2. And so this card has lived on in infamy.
It's incredible that it literally was not seen as a very good card when it was first spoiled. No one respected it. No one really understood what was going on. And then it was a 4 of in 16 pro players decks or whatever, including the winner, if I recall. That's a hell of a Magic card, let me tell you.
And it's also still in the cube.
As it should be. Aaron, what's number 2?
My number 2 is a card that went straight to Vintage and was otherwise the bright spot in what is widely considered to be a terrible set, a laughing stock set. And the card is fine. It still goes for like $1 or $2. But who knew that Notion Thief would rocket to the top of Vintage, and help spawn an archetype known as Grixis Thieves. So Notion Thief is 2 colorless, a blue and a black. It's from Dragon's Maze. Shout out to Dragon's Maze. Creature type, human rogue, 3 power, 1 toughness with flash. If an opponent would draw a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, instead that player skips that draw and you draw a card. So presumably this was an answer to Sphinx's Revelation because that was a very powerful and dominant card in Standard. This came in towards the end of that Standard as a way to try to hose those decks. And I think it did okay. I don't think it really stopped them, but it was definitely something to think about. And occasionally sees play in Legacy and Vintage, which are formats that thrive on their recalls and their brainstorms and their ponders. And now we've seen Hull Breacher, which has been just a takeoff of this. And so, but this was really the first one where you could just sort of flash it in. You could sort of get people with it. And before you know it, you're preventing them from drawing cards. And so, of that set, there aren't many cards that we still talk about. And there certainly aren't many cards that have seen play in multiple formats like Notion Thief.
Yeah.
The most expensive card in Dragon's Maze is worth about $9.
Is that Voice of Resurgence
these days is about $3 or less.
Ooh, what's the most expensive card in Dragon's Maze?
Master of Cruelties.
Really?
Commander, yep.
That is bizarre.
Now, Voice of Resurgence is second, but that's second place.
Yeah, that's not great. Notion Thief is maybe the most memeable Magic card I've ever seen in competitive play. One of the most viral moments to happen on the Open Series when I was working there was the finals of a Legacy Open in which Lauren Nolan, 10K champion Lauren Nolan, played a Notion Thief in response to Justin Uppel activating a Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Oh, yeah.
Stole those 3 cards. Justin had to put 2 cards back on top, and oh, by the way, I'll attack the Jace next turn. Comboed with Dak Faden. You draw the 2 cards, your opponent has to discard the 2 cards.
Nice.
I mean, it combos well with against your opponent's Brainstorms, Faithful Salutings, whatever, and what have you.
And luckily enough, it's still about $1.25 because Dragon's Maze was just such a... you go back and look at Dragon's Maze and you're like, what were they doing? What was happening? It felt like it was up its own butt so far. It couldn't figure out, like, we're kind of a multicolor. Everything's a multicolor. There's a maze involved. Here's some lands.
But there's no dragons.
There's no dragons in Dragon's Maze. I can't. But at least we have sweet designs like this one.
Yep.
Okay, great.
It should have come out when the Hunger Games came out, and then it might have been more popular.
Nice. Well, let me tell you, for my number 2 here, this is a classic card at this point. This card has been around for a very long time. My God, since 2001. We're going on 20 years of this card existing. And it's awesome, honestly, to see the, not namesake, but certainly the visual representation of this card still active in Magic to this day. Chris Bakula still hanging out as the Medley Mage.
This was my number 8.
This was my number 6.
Nice. Well, there you go. Number 8 and number 6 for you guys. Medley Mage, this is just a classic Magic card. This is one of those cards that you can explain what something does by saying, well, it's the Medley Mage effect. And while Wizards has stopped reprinting a lot of the Invitationalist artwork on cards, and even particularly like the box topper, for example, and Double Masters didn't get Chris Bakula back on it, but Solemn Simulacrum that just showed up in the old frame did have the original artwork, so I think there's still hope out there for a Chris Bakula reprint.
The life cycle of this card is so fascinating to me, because when I first started getting into older formats, this was really just a sideboard card. Like, this was something that, it was a scalpel that you brought in for specific decks to take care of specific answers that you had no other way of dealing with, or if you were up against a storm deck, something they were going to need to cast multiple copies of. This was really great. And then we got to a point in Modern when humans became a tier 1 deck, and they were main decking 4 of them. Like, you may not, they may have, they don't care. Like, they will play that sub game of what do I need to name? And this is just a card that they don't leave home without now. And so to see it go from more of a sideboard card, you really want to know what you're bringing in for, to just everything.
Well, let me tell you, the original Plane Chase foil is $83.
Wow.
Medley Mage is a blue and a white mana for a 2/2 rare human wizard. As it enters the battlefield, you choose a non-land card name, and spells with a chosen name can't be cast.
Yep. This was really the reason, I think, really, this and Ether Vial were the reason why humans had a foundation that could be built upon, and Cavern of Souls, really. The mana of Aether Vial, needed Unclaimed Territory to come about in order for the mana to work. It needed Kitesail Freebooter in order to come about to back up Meddling Mage as another type of disruption. And then you had the cavalcade of, we'll just kill you with whatever we have in play. We'll just kill you with Champion of the Parish and Thales Lieutenant, because who cares what we kill you with at this point? Mantis Rider's fine too, like, join the party.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Let's move on here to our number 1. I share a number 1 with somebody.
Not me.
Guess who? Who's going to share this number 1 with you?
I mean, let's face it.
Let's talk about what this card does, what decks this card is in. Of course it's going to be me.
I mean, for me, this was the card that sort of helps define, like, if you want to talk about what is the multicolor human that I would sort of bring up as the example of, what would you say a multicolor human does? Well, it would be it'd fly a little bit under the radar most times. It'd ultimately be very powerful.
My number 4.
And your number 4 and our number 1 is Knight of the freaking Reliquary. Yeah. Ruben, what does it do?
It's a colorless, it's a green, and it's a white mana, originally from Conflux, for a 2/2 human knight. But she gets +1/+1 for each land card in your graveyard. She also has an activated ability. Tap, sacrifice a plains or forest, search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. This card saw competitive play in Standard, obviously. In Loam, in Zoo of various types.
It was not
Zoo,
obvious at the
Zoo.
time, though, I assure you.
At the time, it took a while, because they were like, it's a 2/2 for 3. How am I going to get lands into the graveyards in order so they don't just bolt it immediately? But very quickly, people realized that you could, there were lots of ways to get the Terramorphic Expanses, or, in things like Dark Horizons, which was a popular legacy deck at the time, there were plenty of fetch lands and wastelands to be able to make it an immediate 6/6 or whatever.
Right, and then you would play multiple copies of her, and then you would have 2 6/6s, or they'd finally get rid of the one, and you play the second copy, and it's just as big as the previous one. It wasn't like +1/+1 counters. You know what I mean? Like ways that would make this creature a lot worse. It was the next one is just as good as the first one, and it's cause you just as many problems.
Yeah,
and I played this a lot in Maverick as the main win condition.
Yeah, the Maverick decks love this in Legacy, and it's important to know, like you said, it can be any land. So you can go get a Gaia's Cradle, you can go get a Wasteland, you can go get a Caracas if you need to, you can get a Bajuka Bog if you need to. And so this is a card that you pretty much need to deal with on site, and can also just become a threat in and of itself, where this thing can get stupid big really, really quickly. And an important trait that we like to say about powerful cards is that you can also just play fair Magic. Like, you don't even have to get anything wild. You can just do your thing, and then before you know it, this is a 5/5, this is a 6/6 that you must deal with.
And this new version from Time Spiral Remastered in the old frame,
it's gorgeous.
I don't even like this card, but I love that frame.
The gold, I forgot what the old gold foils looked like. I'm just like,
it's gonna be worth $1 million.
It makes me feel good inside.
Fan-freaking-tastic. Aaron, what's your number 1?
So my number 1 came out 2 years ago. It's not a very old card, but when you look at the impact that it had when it soared all the way to the top of Vintage and didn't really see play in any other formats, but if a card is powerful enough to not only rocket to the top of Magic, to Vintage, one of the oldest formats, and to have an immediate and all-encompassing effect on that format, that it impacts literally every deck. It impacts Dredge, it impacts Shops, it impacts Storm, it impacts Outcome. To have the just that sort of impact, it had to be my number one. We talked earlier about how they've been printing these asymmetrical hate cards, and I think no card embodies this more than my number one, which is Lavinia Azorius Renegade. So Lavinia is 1 white and 1 blue. She was printed in Ravnica Allegiance, which was 2 years ago. What is time? Legendary creature, human soldier, 2 power, 2 toughness. Each opponent can't cast non-creature spells with converted mana cost greater than the number of lands that player controls. Force a Will. I mean, any format with Moxen or Mana Rocks, I mean, you actually need lands now. These decks in Legacy and Vintage famously don't run many lands. I think Delver runs, 17, maybe?
Yeah. No Dread Return, no Mystical Dispute, no Force of Will, no Daze a lot of the time.
Yep. So you think that's fine. From when I first saw this, I was like, it's fine. I can still cast like a Hogak. I can still cast Hollow One. Oh no. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. Like, there is no deck in Vintage that is not touched by this card. Like, I cannot understate that enough. Every deck in Vintage has to respect this card. This changed the game immediately and continues to. You know, I mentioned earlier that Vintage has really turned into quite a fair format. And one of the reasons why is because of cards like this that are seeing play in the Jeskai decks, that are seeing play in the Bant decks. This is turn 1. You can get this on turn 1 a lot of the time. And there are so many games that I've scooped to where it's like, oh, I can't do Force of Vigor. I can't do Contagion. I can't do Force of Will. I'm just done. And so, just to have a card like this that was really snuck into this set, and had a very clear purpose, it just had to be my number one.
Yeah. I mean, and again, also has a terrific Time Spiral remastered version.
I was going to say,
this is one of the, this is one of those cards that you can say, they don't really give Vintage or the older formats a lot, per se.
When they do.
When they do. What? Let's go ahead and just,
because none of the other formats got
something
this. There were people from other formats that were like, well,
right.
Okay, sure, but the people who knew, if you know, it was like, crap,
how dumb this thing is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's and I love the gold foil, but the Ravnica Allegiance promo art that Matt Stewart did that harkens back to the noir peeking through the blinds, except for that she's peeking through what looked like a boarded up window.
Yeah.
That art I love that art so much. But I gotta say, the original art, the Steve Belladin art, looks perfect in the old frame for Time Spiral Remastered.
Oh, it looks so good.
And Lavinia got a good card.
And that's great. This is the hate bears I like. Let's just come down like a pile of bricks. Let's do it. Make them have a shock. Make them have a bolt. Otherwise, you're in big trouble, which is awesome. And that is our top 10 multicolor humans. You'll see them on screen right now. If you review, take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. And I'm glad that we went through all of the humans. I think that this might be the last of our creature types for top 10s.
For at least right this moment.
Until some other creature types start catching back up. But I'm glad that we were able to cover the biggest one for last.
Just remember, about 100 more of these shows, and it's going to be the top 10 top 10s.
That's true.
Can run through that nostalgia for you.
Oh, God. I watched some of our older episodes, and I just kind of cringe a little bit just because we were so,
bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Well, opinions change, looks change. And I think of me in my eras where I had my weird Merc and Gherkin phase, and then I had red hair for a while. Or I look at just you guys and the lighting and the settings we've used and different cameras. Ruben, when we first started, you were staying in like an outdoor Mexican villa-looking place.
Yep. The first live episode was at one of the GP Vegases, and I was out back on a patio. Yeah.
Oh my God, we've come so far.
What a world. Well, let's move here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and AlterSleeves.com, my co-hosts Aaron Campbell and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online on Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.